On the 27th of January 2026, a 50-year-old woman named Stephanie Cavalli walked out first at Chanel's haute couture show, her silver hair cut short and left to grow the color it wanted, and nobody in the room treated it as a stunt. She had walked away from modeling 12 years earlier at 38 because she had decided she was too old for the work. 6 weeks later, she opened Chanel's autumn and winter ready-to-wear show as well, under the glass roof of the Grand Palais, and by spring the fashion press had stopped calling her unusual and started calling her the one to watch. She had become, without quite intending to, one of the most discussed faces in what the industry now calls the silver economy, the movement putting women over 60 back at the center of fashion. For decades, the industry had run on an unspoken rule that a woman was visible in fashion somewhere between 16 and 30, and after that she was expected, quietly, to step back. The audience that broke that rule now has its own name in trade coverage. People are calling it the silver economy. None of this started in 2026. CoverGirl made a model named Mae Musk the face of a campaign in 2018, its first for someone past 65, and she said at the time that after 50 years of modeling, she felt like an overnight success. The company's own reasoning was straightforward. It wanted to reach older women the same way it had already reached women of different backgrounds, by hiring people who actually looked like them. The people who mattered to this shift weren't, at first, on runways. Lynn Slater, who writes online under the name Accidental Icon, built a devoted following in her 60s by dressing for herself rather than for anyone assessing her age. She became the modeling agency Brigade's first client, over 60, and its managing director said openly that the decision had nothing to do with her birth year and everything to do with her voice and the community that had already formed around her. Grece Ghanem, a Lebanese-Canadian stylist Vogue has called ageless, built an audience in the millions before Sephora and MAC Cosmetics came looking for her. A Japanese couple known online as Aki and Koichi, both in their 70s, had been dressing together for years before 3 separate luxury houses came looking for them, Loewe and Cezanne among them. Helen Mirren had been doing something similar for longer. L'Oreal had built years of groundwork around her, and the argument she gave the brand wasn't that age could be reversed, but that it could be worn with authority. By this year, the brands had caught up. Twiggy, at 76, appeared in Burberry's spring and summer campaign. Kristen McMenamy, 61, closed the Tom Ford show to the kind of attention usually reserved for a debut. Laura Dern, 62, made her runway debut altogether, opening for Gabriella Hearst in Paris. Gillian Anderson, 57, walked for Miu Miu. Kate Moss, 52, and Cindy Crawford, 60, closed Gucci during the same week. Susie Cave, 59, was photographed close enough for the fine lines around her eyes to be the point of the shot, not the flaw in it, for Tom Ford's own campaign. And Paulina Porizkova, 61, became the newest face of Estee Lauder, posting her silver hair and her wrinkles to an audience of 1.4 million people, without softening either. In France specifically, the same shift showed up somewhere unexpected. Simon Porte Jacquemus one of the country's most closely watched designers, made his own grandmother, a woman named Liline, the first official ambassador for his brand, and she walked the red carpet at the Met Gala, the way any of his usual models might have. Nathalie Cross-Quattin, who leads the French Federation of Modeling Agencies, welcomed the wider trend without much hesitation, describing women over 50 as simply well cared for, fit, and easy for a luxury house to build a story around. Then in May, Vogue put two 76-year-old women on its cover, Meryl Streep and Anna Wintour, photographed by Annie Leibovitz and styled by Grace Coddington, both dressed for the kind of image the magazine had never allowed itself before. The timing had a practical reason. It was tied to the release of a sequel to a film about the magazine itself. But the choice still meant something, and Wintour said as much in her own pages, writing that she had come to feel her age was an advantage rather than a liability. It wasn't that the industry changed its mind about beauty. It did the arithmetic. According to the State of Fashion report from McKinsey and the Business of Fashion, people over 50 now hold 72% of personal wealth in the United States, and they're expected to drive nearly half of all growth in global fashion spending. And yet, by that same report, only 3% of them feel as though the brands selling to them actually see them. Jacinth Bassett, who runs a consultancy called Ageism, is never in style. Put it plainly to Fashionista, bringing in creators over 50 is both a commercial win and a cultural one, and one of the more obvious wins available to any brand willing to take it. The people doing the casting have started saying similar things out loud. Lisa Dimpf Meggins, who has worked on several of the shows leading this shift, told Who What Wear that she casts the women a brand is actually trying to sell to, not 20 teenagers who happen to photograph well in the clothes. She has also suggested more pointedly that the industry's old obsession with youth had something to do with how much easier young women were to direct. It's worth sitting for a moment with what didn't change at the same time. This was, by most accounts, the most age-diverse fashion month in recent memory. And it was also a season in which plus-size representation on the runway fell to under 1% of all bookings, a retreat from ground the industry had seemed to be gaining only a few years earlier. Pierpaolo Piccioli, casting his most recent Balenciaga show, said he'd found it easier to source older models than larger ones this time, and that where he'd once been able to book women of different builds without difficulty, this year he'd needed to fly them in from elsewhere. Age had become simple to solve for. Size, somehow, had become harder. The other thing that didn't happen is the thing most often claimed about it. The anti-aging industry didn't collapse. It's worth being precise here, because the story travels in a simpler, more satisfying version, the one where women over 60 stopped buying and the whole business folded. The market data doesn't support that. The global anti-aging industry was valued at nearly 80 billion American dollars in 2025 and is projected to exceed 130 billion American dollars by 2035, growing steadily rather than collapsing at all. What changed was the label. Companies, including Shiseido, Lancome, Dior, and Vichy have spent the last year moving away from the language of reversal and toward the language of longevity, positioning their newest products around skin function over time, rather than the promise of looking younger by next week. Vichy opened what it calls its longevity clinic in Paris in February 2026 as the most visible expression of that repositioning. L'Oréal Paris had already spent years laying the groundwork for this argument through ambassadors like Helen Mirren and Andy McDowell. So the wider shift was less a sudden reversal than the rest of the industry catching up to a bet one brand had already made. It's worth noticing, too, that the customer being sold to hasn't changed. Only the word used to describe what she's buying has, which may be the more useful way to understand what French women over 60 are actually doing instead, if they are doing anything differently at all. They are not, in large numbers, chasing a return to 25. Industry figures show at-home skincare routines growing faster than clinic-based treatments, which points to women managing their own skin on their own terms, instead of handing the decision to somebody else's appointment book. They are also choosing tailoring that fits the body they currently have, rather than the one they are told to miss, and letting their hair go the color it wants to go, gray, silver, whatever it arrives as. It is a smaller shift than the runway coverage makes it sound, and a slower one, and it does not resolve into a single triumphant sentence any more than getting older does. For now, the season has simply moved differently than the ones before it, and Stephanie Cavalli, who once thought her career was already finished at 38, is still walking in shows that used to end for women her age long before this. Whether that counts as women over 60 no longer being invisible, or simply as the industry finally noticing what was already there, depends a little on who is asked.